What's the worst "I hate to break it to you" moment you had with someone? I used to work in a customer care call center for a major telecommunications company. A woman called in one day to inquire about two $99 charges on her bill from Lava Life. She kept pressing about the charges, what they were, and I had to explain to her that Lava Life is a dating service and that the charges were legitimate. If she didn't make them, did someone else live in her house who might have? There was only her husband, and I heard her go from, but he would never to, "I have to go now," as it set in. That was almost 20 years ago now, and I still feel awful about it. There was a rule at my job where only one of these two supervisors could be off at a time. One of them loved to take a full week off work during holidays to get more bang for his PTO buck. One year, he had Thanksgiving week off, but the other supervisor had family come to town that week on late notice. The other supervisor asked him to cancel just one of his days so she could spend the day with family. He declined, even after she basically begged him, and he even said he didn't have anything to do that day. She then proceeded to take PTO days every Wednesday of a holiday week for the next calendar year, effectively blocking him from taking his cheap weeks off. He told me that he thought it was funny because he knew she didn't have enough time to take all those vacation days off, and she'd eventually have to cancel some of them. I got to tell him, "I hate to break it to you, but she only took 2 hours off each of those days." See, the rule didn't differentiate between a partial or whole day, so she only had to burn 24 or so hours to block him. He looked devastated. It was kind of petty on both of their parts, but I give her credit for being creative in her retribution, and don't blame her a bit for what she did. I had a guy working for me who was extremely nice, easy to get along with, and wildly inept. Not even like low effort, but just not capable of learning seemingly basic tasks. We tried everything: coaching, giving him legitimate checklist instructions, having a team lead sit with him for a couple of weeks to walk him through the basics, everything. Everyone said the same thing: he just couldn't do the job. Everything he did had to be double-checked by somebody else, which meant that we might as well have somebody else do it. But everyone liked the guy. They thought he was easygoing and cool to be around. Still, he just straight up couldn't do that job. So I had to find another place for him in the company that would better match his skills. The option would be for him to either take the lower job with lower pay, or he would be fired with severance. I was not looking forward to the conversation. I called him in for a one-on-one to break it to him, and the first thing he started with was, "Hey boss, before we start, I just want to tell you that I really feel like I've been doing a great job here, and I would like to talk about a raise." Yeah, that conversation was not a fun one. Had a friend ask me about some green sign in the distance. It was, in fact, a sodium vapor sign giving off an intense orange light, which sodium vapor is known for. I had to tell him right there that he was colorblind. He was in his mid-30s too. A lot of odd things that had happened in his past fell into place for him that day. Having to tell a student who was almost totally blind that she likely couldn't be an ER nurse was difficult. She and her dad moved to our district, and at the IEP, her dad started talking about how he couldn't wait for Sue to go to nursing school. I frantically scanned my brain, trying to think of how someone who was going to need Braille could do that job. Then Sue piped up to say that her dream was to be an ER nurse. Her prior district told her she could do anything, including this. She had a degenerative disease that would eventually make her blind. I talked to my friends who are nurses. I talked to our career counselor at the school, and I researched. But there just wasn't any way someone who couldn't see could be an ER nurse. I reconvened the IEP and had to explain this. I knew both were in denial, but I was not happy that the prior district pumped up this idea. I mean, sure, there are lots of things she could still do, but that just wasn't one of them. Then another student came from the same district with the idea she could be a CSI investigator. She was also nearly blind. I had to tell my friend that the online girlfriend he'd been talking to for months was actually a scammer using stolen photos. He was planning to send her money to come visit, and breaking the news to him was one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. My best friend in high school was overweight and would sweat profusely. We would come in after lunch in Texas, and he would smell awful. I think he would wear his clothes without washing them after sweating. We had English after, and the AC sucked, so the teacher put a fan in the window. He would sit in front of the fan and blow his funk over everyone. The class got together and voted that I should be the one to tell him. Well, I had to break it to him that for the last year he had smelled horribly. I felt pretty bad, but he never stunk again. 15 years ago, my friend's father sadly passed away shortly after we graduated college. It was devastating for him. He figured he'd at least get a nice money boost to help him get back on his feet. But unfortunately, his father kept it a secret that he was deep in debt and had no liquid cash to his name. My friend had no support and fell into a terrible depression. He was broke, couch crashed with me and our friends for a while, and he quit his job. And he got comfortable with this new lifestyle. 2 years later, he was still spending a month here and there with various friends around the city, eating their food, occupying their couch, sipping off their booze cabinet, using the terrible, tragic passing of his father as his reasoning for being the way he was. It had been 2 years. We understood the pain he felt was real, but it was really time for him to actually get back on his feet and take care of himself. We didn't know how to explain it to him, but we all felt he was taking advantage of us and was using his father's death as an excuse to just not get a job. I found him a job, a nice one he would be good at, he went to school for, and didn't need prior work experience. I talked to a team lead and an HR rep and got him a contact line for them, basically assuring an interview and a job offer if he arrived on time and sober. Weeks later, my HR rep and this team lead were confused, thinking I didn't relay the information to him. He never called. I gave him a layup of a job opportunity, and he just ignored it outright. I called him out on it, but he told me to calm down and chill out, and that I wasn't being sensitive to his depression, and I wasn't understanding of his needs. So my worst, I hate to break it to you moment, wasn't actually with him. It was with all my friends afterward. I had to tell them all to turn him down every time he asked to stay a week at their place. It sucked. The timing and my response to his refusal would give it away. This guy knew I was the horrible jerk who turned all his friends against him and denied him free room and board. Hell, I was probably going to be the sole reason he'd blame for his inevitable descent into homelessness. I accepted the burden and called them up, explaining I had a job lined up for him and he refused, and we must all stop giving him a free place to stay if he won't take an easy job. Yes, it sucks his dad died, and it sucks he didn't get any kind of inheritance to start his life properly. It sucks he felt this terrible depression that lingered for years, and most of all, it sucks he had a group of enabling friends like me who humored it for so long it just became his accepted norm. We failed him. He didn't end up homeless, though. Without us offering his jobless butt a couch to crash on anymore, he ended up moving in with his aunt. Apparently, she didn't take his excuses, didn't put up with his laziness, and did all the things we should have been doing all along. No booze allowed, no weed, no gaming after she went to bed. She only had one TV in the house, and it was for Food Network only. He got a job developing 3D assets for VR titles and started moving up and up, creating VR experiences for architecture companies. Dude still hates me probably, and I'll admit I made mistakes to justify it. But I'm really grateful his aunt was there. I did what I needed to do, but it would have been even 10 times worse if he had ended up living on the streets, still blaming his father's sudden death for his 2-decade-long predicament. Not me. But my ex, a couple of years ago, got a job as a cook working at a big hospital. They had a mostly set and reoccurring cycle of dishes items in Golden Corral-style stations around the cafeteria. Basic food dressed up or pre-prepped. Nothing too fancy. His first month, he became familiar with some of the residents and doctors who would make small talk and shoot the breeze with him as he loaded up their plates. One of these doctors was a man originally from India who was very enthusiastic about the country fried chicken smothered in pepper gravy. He said it was his favorite dish out of anything else there. And it wasn't uncommon for him to stop by at the end of his shift to purchase extra to take home. My partner's first time working the entree station, the doctor pointed and asked my partner for his usual country fried chicken. My partner stared at him, confused. They didn't serve country fried chicken, but they did have chicken fried steak. When he nonchalantly informed the doctor of this, the man's eyes went wide. He looked genuinely shocked. "This isn't chicken?" My partner described the expression on his face as going from jarred and baffled to so sad when he realized he had been eating beef this entire time, but also that it had tasted so delicious. Apparently, despite eating other types of meat, the man was still deeply tied to his Hindu roots and avoided beef in his regular diet because of this. The previous cook before him had mistaken these ambiguous meat patties smothered in thick gravy for chicken, so wires got crossed, and he then relayed that incorrect information to the doctor. I still cringe when I think about this. My ex felt so sad he had to be the one to tell him. My ex-wife tried to commit suicide twice in 1 week. The second time, she was committed to a psych ward. Her mother decided to come over and help with the kids and household chores. The second day she was at the house, she came out of the bedroom disoriented. Turns out she was having a stroke. For the third time that week, I had to call 911. I had to go to the psych ward and tell my suicidal, drugged-up wife that her mother, who she was very close to, was in the hospital because she had a stroke. My dad has been a musician since the 70s. He's incredibly talented, can play multiple instruments, and has written many songs that honestly would sound at home on the radio. About a year or so ago, some scam artists told him they loved his work and wanted to represent him and get his music out there to make money. They just needed a small upfront fee. My poor dad was so happy too. He had wanted this for literal decades. I think that's what clouded his judgment at the time. And yeah, the moment he told me, loud alarms went off in my head. I researched these people online and found an ocean of comments saying they all got scammed. I wanted my dad to be happy, but I couldn't let him be scammed, so I told him. He accepted it, kind of brushed it off. But it was that, "Yeah, I should have known this would happen," kind of response. Really depressing to see him so happy, just to be let down. I know to you and me this would have been an obvious scam, but my dad is from a different time and has no idea about computers or online culture. I found his most beloved song by us, his family, on YouTube. Here's the link if you all want to listen. Australia. I was crossing the road at Great Portland Street when I heard a screeching of brakes. I turned around to see a dude flying through the air. It all happened in slow motion. I got to him quickly and checked him over. He said, "I'm going skiing tomorrow." I said, "No, you're not," as I found the bottom half of his leg was snapped clean in half. I had to phone his wife and break the news. I had an employee who was a strict vegetarian for religious reasons. One day, we were discussing the employee salad bar, and he mentioned how much he loved the Caesar dressing packets they offered. I was surprised and stupidly blurted out, "Oh, I didn't realize you ate fish." He responded that he was vegetarian and gave me a quizzical look. I had to explain that the salad dressing contained both fish and Parmesan cheese, which is almost always cultured with animal rennet. He didn't believe me, and the next day insisted on reading the ingredients on one of the packets to me to prove to me that I was wrong. Then he got to the anchovies and got quiet. I still feel awful that he had to find out that way. Neither of us handled the situation well. Sister's a victim of her own impulsivity. She really likes new cars and will roll negative equity into a new car. Then she'll get bored of it, stop maintaining it, trade it in for a loss, and have an even bigger loan. And this was back when loans were pretty much free, and they could finance anybody. So she called me up all excited because she found a new truck, got approved for financing, and was on the way to go buy it. I went to meet her there. Big V8 full-size pickup truck for a woman working part-time and living in a congested city. "Why do you want this?" "My kids need a place to transport their bikes, and I want to go camping." So I test drove it with her. The salesman was doing everything in his power to make the sale. Fair enough, he's not a financial advisor. He doesn't need to deal with the fallout. But right there in the showroom, I had to tell her, "Look, This is an awful idea. You can't afford this. It's going to be a huge burden on you, and you need to walk away. Thankfully, she did. The salesman would have punched me if he could have gotten away with it. He was seething mad. Back around 2007, I had an older colleague who was excitedly flitting around the office telling everyone about some lottery she had won and that she was going to quit just as soon as the 100,000 cleared in her account. Mary was only in her 50s, so still years away from retirement. On top of that, she was an administrative assistant at a nonprofit, so we're not talking about a lucrative career where she was squirreling away funds for a rainy day. And here she was, ready to resign a decade early over a sum that would only be worth a few years of salary after taxes. Did I mention that there was talk of a fur coat? I would have normally kept my mouth shut. After all, her poor financial planning was none of my business, and frankly, I would not have missed her in the office. I was not a fan. I just couldn't be silent once she got to my office, though. It was obviously a scam. I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but are you absolutely sure this is legit? Oh yeah, I already gave them my banking information and everything. They're depositing the money today. You may want to call your bank just to be sure. No, it's fine. Okay, congrats. Dear reader, not even an hour later, I hear her screeching into her phone that, no, don't close my account. They're supposed to be depositing the money. Depositing. No, depositing. No, they're not taking it out. They're putting it in. My office mate and I just looked at each other like, Mary didn't say anything to anyone about the fraud. ETA. The bank calling her as a security measure saved her from getting cleaned out. The scammers didn't actually get her money. Epilogue. About a year later, a bunch of us, Mary and myself included, were laid off at the beginning of the recession. I didn't like Mary, but I didn't wish her unwell. I can only imagine how much harder it was for her to find work than us 20 and 30-somethings who lost our jobs. I know the people laid off were cherry-picked based on who the founder didn't like. Question a process? List. Do anything other than cheerlead the founder's ideas? List. Run around the office talking about quitting? Mary absolutely landed on the list that day. She had been one of the first employees the organization ever hired, and just like that, she was disposable. I had been working on a project for about 10 months, pouring my time and energy into it. Finally, it was complete, and I had the opportunity to present it to my department's leadership. They loved it, which felt fantastic. It was a proud moment for me when they decided to escalate it to the next level. The big moment came when I got to present to the president of the company, an incredible highlight in my early career. I went into that presentation with all the confidence I could muster, and it seemed to go really well. The president and the senior leadership team appeared pleased, and I felt a sense of accomplishment. After my presentation, everyone else in the meeting was dismissed. Then the president asked me, my boss's boss, and our senior director to stay behind. My heart raced, thinking it was a good sign. However, he delivered some disappointing news. While he acknowledged the great work we had done, there was going to be a strategic shift and the project would not be moving forward. That moment stung. After nearly a year of hard work, it felt like a total waste. I had invested so much into this project only to have it sidelined. Not long after that meeting, there were layoffs across the company. Given the uncertainty that had settled in, I decided to take a buyout. The environment felt shaky, and I didn't want to be left in a position that could easily be eliminated. It was a tough decision, but it felt like the right one at the time. I was at a tech entrepreneurial meetup back in 2012 when I struck up a conversation with a guy who was buzzing with excitement about his billion-dollar idea. He was describing an app designed for gym goers to track their workouts and participate in challenges. He even mentioned the potential for social media integration, allowing users to share their progress with friends. Curious, I asked, you mean like Strava? I thought he might have identified a niche market that hadn't yet been fully covered by existing apps like Strava and Endomondo. To my surprise, he looked at me with confusion and replied, "What?" It turned out he had never heard of Strava or any similar apps. The look on his face when I showed him Strava and he realized his idea had already been realized was almost tragic. It was hard to comprehend how he had managed to get so far with his concept without researching existing applications. It was a stark reminder of how vital it is to check the market before diving headfirst into an entrepreneurial venture. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more.